Hi people, it's Archivist here, and today I wanted to give my initial impressions on the Marvel Avengers beta. I have come away from this game enjoying it more than I expected to, but there are a couple of things that, I don't know, I wasn't totally positive on, but they were somewhat inevitable in a way. So let's start off with the positive. First of all, I really enjoyed the story missions in this game, especially the first one on the Golden Gate Bridge. The way you're switching rapidly between the heroes who feel relatively different to control, the overall spectacle, the graphics, the immersion factor, I thought it was all amazing. Just you're very quickly experiencing Captain America, Hulk, Iron Man, Black Widow, and it's just so much going on. And I thought to myself as it was happening, is this going to be reflective of the entire experience? Because this really is quite something. And unfortunately, no, it isn't reflective of the entire experience. It's a bit like the God of War 3 opening where you fight Poseidon, where it's an absolutely amazing first impression. And then the game doesn't exactly go downhill, but it certainly flattens out. And that's exactly what I feel happens here. After that initial mission, where you start playing this secondary story mission, and after that, these more generic multiplayer missions, it definitely felt a little bit less special. The spectacle definitely wasn't there, and it felt more like a generic beat 'em up. Not necessarily bad, I enjoyed it, but it's just such a big difference between that first epic mission on the bridge versus this mission you're seeing here where I'm just running through an open world, killing some enemies, and it goes into a very Destiny structure where you're just dropped into an open world. There's a check mark on the map and you have to go to it and defeat some enemies and do something pretty bland that's just interesting enough to make you want to play it, but with the ultimate goal of giving you loot. Whereas if I go back to that first mission, that actually felt unique. And the thing is, this is just a beta and they're intentionally making sure that you don't see all of the story missions. There are very few in here. And I think my ultimate opinion of the game is going to come down to quite simply how many story missions like that first mission are going to be in the game. Because if we get a complete experience with plenty of missions of that caliber, then I'm not going to have any kind of concern, because I'll just consider missions like what you're seeing here to be the side missions, so things to just enjoy playing the characters in a more casual setting. But if missions like this make up the bulk of the experience, I think it's going to be a slightly lesser opinion, because again, like, it's fun playing as these heroes that we don't usually get to play in video games, but what you're doing feels a little bit cookie cutter, like you're not doing something specific to the heroes. And that was a challenge that they were always going to come up against. If you look at one of the best Marvel games ever made, if not the best Marvel game ever made, Spider-Man for the PlayStation 4. The great thing about that game is that they really focus in on Spider-Man himself and capitalize on all his unique abilities to swing around the city, to use stealth gameplay, agility, fantastic combat, mixing in his gadgets and his strength and his agility. And that all felt very tailored to Spider-Man himself. But if we come into this game, they simply can't do that. They need to make sure that the gameplay mechanics can be replicated in some form across all of the heroes. And it seems in the story missions, they can create some areas where you do have to be a specific character to do something. Maybe only the Hulk can jump onto a wall and climb up it, but you'll never get anything on the level of Spider-Man zipping through New York City. There'll never be that level of distinction. And I don't really want to be too hard at all on the developers, because that's just the reality. There's no way they could have crafted incredibly unique, calibrated experiences for every single hero. That just wouldn't be possible. But I think they have done a reasonably good job of creating some distinctions. But I think I would sum up my current findings as, although the characters do feel very different in terms of, let's say, Miss Marvel versus Hulk. If you play the same mission as Hulk or Miss Marvel, Hulk does feel like a lumbering big monster character, moving a bit slower, and when he hits enemies you really feel him hitting him, whereas Miss Marvel feels a bit more agile and a little bit more, well, flexible, as you would expect from the character. But in terms of me actually playing it, I'm fundamentally doing the same thing. I'm dodging when I need to dodge with the B button, I'm hitting when I need to hit with the X button, holding down Y on shield enemies. I'm fundamentally doing the same thing, but in terms of how they feel, I think they did actually do a reasonably good job there. And I should point out that these are two brawler-style characters. I think we might start to see better distinctions when we can play more as characters like Iron Man, who can fly around and shoot from afar, maybe even Thor, who, in the brief time I was able to play as him, felt like there was a bit of a mash-up between throwing your hammer and then up-close brawling. So I think maybe when the roster starts to open up, maybe things will start to feel a little bit more distinctive. But in terms of playing Miss Marvel and Hulk and switching between them, it did feel quite similar in terms of the mechanics. Just the distinctions are there in the visuals and actually the feedback you get in the controller. Like, sometimes we overlook things like that, but plugging my Xbox One controller into my PC here, I felt like the rumble was really good when playing as Hulk. Like, when you hit the enemy, the feedback is very good in the controller, and I know that's something we take for granted these days, but I felt it really elevated the experience for that character. Like, Hulk, just in himself, it's an interesting thing to unpack, because even though they can't make him like the Hulk in Hulk Ultimate Destruction, where he can just jump for miles and one-shot enemies, smashing down entire buildings, they have to make sure he can't just one-shot every single enemy in the game. But at the same time, they do use things like the visuals or the animations of his attack, where he can do that, pick up and start smashing them on the ground, to sell you on the fact that you're controlling a very powerful character, even though technically Miss Marvel is doing about as much damage, whereas she just has the ability to stretch. But, you know, even then with Miss Marvel, she's a character who can stretch, you know, she can throw her punches very far, and they do, I think, weave that ability very well into her animation. So it's not just specifically the abilities where she needs to stretch. She'll always do things like expand her hands when she hits enemies or her feet, or she can make herself entirely gigantic. I did find that combat could get a little bit chaotic. There's a bit where I got a little bit overwhelmed in the mission and the Hulk had to save me. And I suppose that was mostly due to the fact that when you've got enemies coming at you from all directions, it can be hard to know when they're going to hit you from behind. Maybe that's something I just need to get used to. I don't like to be too quick about criticizing those things, because sometimes it's just a skill you have to build up. But it was something that happened to me, but could just be because obviously I'm playing this for the first time. I haven't played it with anyone yet, even though there is the ability to play these missions in multiplayer, and maybe that will elevate the experience in a way I'm not immediately appreciating. But in terms of just going through the missions, it was very Destiny and like, go here, do that, go here, do that. A little bit of character interaction, but nothing particularly special. But I'm not negative on this game at all. I think it's important to set your expectations accordingly. Something I have heard people say is that this game is Marvel Ultimate Alliance on a big budget. I would also say that, but the difference is I don't say that in a negative way. I always thought that the biggest issue with Marvel Ultimate Alliance, especially if you look at the likes of Marvel Ultimate Alliance 3, that was a fun game, but it felt almost like an indie title. I've always felt that that series could do with a little bit of a budget lift to make it, I don't know, more widely appealing and more impressive. And that's sort of what this game is. And I don't think we should be saying that's a terrible thing, because it's a good game. It's an enjoyable game. The Destiny elements, I'm not so sure about, but as long as there are sufficient full story missions, I'm not going to come down too hard on it in the full game. It's just obviously hard to tell at this stage. So, as always, people, thanks very much for watching and see you next time.